I never thought my own child could abandon me, but life has a way of revealing people's true colors at the most inconvenient moments. Like in the middle of a foreign airport with announcements blaring in Portuguese, surrounded by hurrying strangers who glance at us with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Mom, I can't do this anymore." Nathan's face was flushed with anger, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights as he gestured wildly. Every single trip, every family gathering, every holiday, it's always about Michael and his needs. I shifted my weight, feeling every one of my 68 years in my aching bones. Beside me, Michael rocked back and forth, hands over his ears, humming to block out the overwhelming sensory assault of the airport. My heart ached for both my sons in that moment, though in entirely different ways. "Nathan, please, it was just a small meltdown. The flight change was unexpected. You know how Michael struggles with sudden changes to plans." I tried to keep my voice calm, knowing that additional stress would only make things worse for Michael. "Once we get to the hotel in Lisbon, everything will settle down." "A small meltdown?" Nathan's laugh was harsh. He threw himself on the floor screaming for 45 minutes. "We missed our connection. Now we're stuck in São Paulo for at least 24 hours. I glanced at the departure board again, confirming what I already knew. Our flight to Lisbon had departed without us, while we were dealing with Michael's distress. The next available flight wasn't until tomorrow evening. "It's one day, Nathan. We'll find a hotel near the airport." I brought Michael's weighted blanket and noise-canceling headphones in my carry-on. "He'll be fine." "No, Mom, I won't be fine." Nathan's voice dropped, taking on the cold, efficient tone he used in business negotiations. "I've put my life on hold for this family vacation. Cancelled 3 important meetings, rescheduled a merger discussion, all to spend quality time with you and Michael because you guilt-tripped me about family obligation. That's not fair. What's not fair is that for 33 years, everything has revolved around him." Nathan pointed at Michael, who was now tracing the pattern on the airport carpet with intense focus, his own way of finding calm. "My entire childhood, my college graduation, even Dad's funeral had to be Michael appropriate." I flinched at the mention of Edward's funeral 5 years ago. We had indeed kept it small and quiet for Michael's sake. Nathan had wanted a large service befitting the founder of Winter's Technology Solutions, another battle in the long war between my sons' opposing needs. "I've booked myself on the next flight to Lisbon," Nathan continued, pulling his designer luggage closer. "I'm going to salvage what's left of this vacation. You two can figure out your own way there, or go home. I honestly don't care anymore." "Nathan!" I grabbed his arm. "You can't just leave us here. I don't speak Portuguese. I've never navigated a foreign country alone, especially not with Michael." He glanced pointedly at my hand until I released him. "Maybe it's time you learned how to manage on your own, Mom. You've got Dad's credit cards. You've got your phone with translation apps. You've got everything except the backbone to stop letting Michael's condition control everyone around him. He can't help who he is." My voice was barely a whisper now. "Neither can I." Nathan straightened his jacket, the same determined set to his jaw that Edward used to have when making difficult business decisions. "I'm done sacrificing my life. You chose this path when you decided to keep him at home rather than looking at residential options like Dr. Mercer suggested. He's not a burden to be hidden away. He's your brother, and you're my mother. But that hasn't stopped you from forgetting I exist whenever he needs something." The announcement for final boarding of the Lisbon flight echoed through the terminal. Nathan checked his watch again. "That's my cue." "Please," I said, hating the desperation in my voice. "At least help us find a hotel for tonight." He was already walking backward toward the gate. "You have Google Maps. The Marriott is 2 kilometers away. Take a taxi." "Nathan, Severa," he called back, using one of the few Portuguese phrases we'd learned in preparation for our unexpected layover. "Deal with it. Figure it out. Manage on your own." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of passengers rushing to board, leaving his 68-year-old mother and his autistic brother stranded in a foreign country where we didn't speak the language. I stood frozen, a lifetime of accommodation and peacemaking rendering me momentarily paralyzed. Michael continued tracing patterns on the carpet, oblivious to the crisis unfolding. A kind-faced cleaning woman paused in her work to ask me something in Portuguese, likely checking if I needed help, but I could only shake my head in mute confusion. The shock gave way to something else, something that had been dormant inside me for decades. Anger, Not the fleeting irritation I sometimes felt when Nathan canceled family dinners for work, but a deep, molten rage that he could so callously abandon his own family when we needed him. My hands trembled as I guided Michael to a quiet corner of the terminal, setting him up with his tablet and headphones, his lifeline in overwhelming situations. Once he was settled, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd never used, though Edward had insisted I keep it. Gregory Martinez, the family attorney who had handled Edward's complex estate and who continued to manage the legal affairs of Winters Technology Solutions. Nathan had taken over as CEO after his father's death, but the majority shares remained in my name, a fact my older son conveniently tended to forget. I'd always left the business matters to Edward, and then Nathan, had signed whatever papers they put before me, had trusted them to handle the company Edward had built from nothing, had focused instead on giving Michael the support and love he needed. But now, watching my son tap rhythmically on his tablet screen, his face relaxed now that he was in his comforting digital environment, I realized my accommodation had enabled Nathan's worst qualities. My passivity had allowed him to believe he could discard us when we became inconvenient. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. Gregory Martinez speaking. His voice was crisp, professional. Mr. Martinez, this is Patricia Winters. A pause. Mrs. Winters, this is unexpected. Is everything all right? No, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Everything is not all right. I need your help with 2 matters immediately. Of course. How can I assist you? First, I need you to arrange immediate hotel accommodations and assistance for myself and Michael in São Paulo, Brazil. We've been, I swallowed hard, left here by Nathan during a layover. His silence spoke volumes. Second, I continued, I need you to call an emergency meeting of the Winters Technology Board of Directors. As majority shareholder, I'm exercising my right to review and potentially restructure the company leadership. Mrs. Winters, Gregory's voice had shifted from surprise to careful professionalism. That's a significant action. Are you certain? Mr. Martinez, I interrupted. My husband trusted you implicitly, which is why I'm calling you now. For 35 years, I've put everyone else's needs before my own. I've stood in the background while Nathan took more and more control over Edward's legacy. I've watched him grow increasingly dismissive of his brother's worth as a human being. Today, he crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. I looked at Michael, who met my eyes briefly with his gentle smile before returning to his game. My beautiful, complex, challenging son who saw the world through such a different lens than most. I understand, Gregory said after a moment. Consider it done. I'll have a car and interpreter at the airport within the hour, and accommodations arranged immediately. As for the board meeting, I'll need to review the bylaws, but I believe we can convene virtually within 24 hours. Thank you. Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a surge of determination. One more thing. I want you to prepare notification documents for Nathan, to be delivered the moment he lands in Lisbon. I want him to understand immediately that actions have consequences. What specifically should these documents state? I thought for a moment, then spoke with a clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. That effective immediately, his access to all corporate accounts has been suspended pending review, that his position as CEO is under evaluation by the board, and that his mother and brother will be just fine without him. As I ended the call, a strange sense of calm settled over me. Michael looked up, sensing the shift in my energy, and reached for my hand, his way of checking if I was okay. We're going to be all right, Michael, I told him, squeezing his fingers gently. In fact, I think this might be the beginning of a whole new adventure for both of us. I had no idea then just how right I would be. The first night in a strange country is always disorienting. When you're a 68-year-old woman who has barely traveled outside her comfort zone, with an autistic son who thrives on routine, it's nothing short of terrifying. Yet sometimes terror gives birth to courage. Está tudo bem? Asked Teresa, the hotel staff member Gregory had arranged to assist us. Her kind eyes crinkled with concern as she helped settle Michael into our suite at the Grand Hyatt São Paulo. I think so, I replied, grateful that Teresa spoke excellent English. We're just a bit overwhelmed. That was an understatement. My hands hadn't stopped trembling since Nathan's departure, though I'd kept them steady around Michael. Years of practice hiding my distress for his sake. Your son, Teresa said hesitantly, watching as Michael methodically arranged his few belongings on the bed in precise order. "He is autistic, yes?" I nodded, bracing for the usual awkward sympathy or discomfort. "My nephew also," she said, surprising me with her warm smile. 19 years old, very smart with computers, but crowds. She mimicked an explosion with her hands. "Yes," I laughed softly, relieved by her understanding. "Exactly like that. Would it help him to have a schedule? For your stay?" I could have hugged her. "That would be wonderful. Michael does much better when he knows what to expect." As Teresa worked with me to create a visual schedule for our unexpected Brazilian detour, I felt something unwinding inside me, a tension so familiar I hadn't even recognized it anymore. The constant anticipation of judgment, of having to explain or apologize for Michael's differences. Within an hour, we had a printed schedule with pictures of the hotel, restaurant times, and activities that might work for Michael's sensitivities. Teresa even arranged for the hotel's pianist to meet Michael the next day, having noticed his interest when we passed the lobby piano. After she left, Michael and I ate a quiet dinner in our suite. I watched him methodically separate each food item on his plate, his movements precise and deliberate. At 33, his handsome face still held a childlike quality, particularly when he was focused on a task. Edward's eyes, my chin, a perfect blend of us both. "Michael," I said gently, waiting until he looked up briefly to show he was listening. "We're going to stay in Brazil for a little while before going to Portugal. Is that okay with you?" He considered this, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. "Nathan is gone?" The simple question pierced my heart. Michael might miss social cues and struggle with abstract concepts, but he understood abandonment. "Yes, sweetheart. Nathan went ahead to Portugal." He was angry. Not a question, a statement. "Yes, he was, but that's not your fault." Michael nodded slowly. "I didn't like the airport. Too loud, too many people." "I know, honey. It was overwhelming for me, too." He resumed eating, then paused again. "Can we go to the beach here? I want to see the waves." The simplicity of the request brought tears to my eyes. Not Portugal, not the luxury destinations Nathan had planned, just the beach, the waves. "Yes, Michael, we can go to the beach." After dinner, as Michael settled into his bedtime routine, my phone buzzed with a message from Gregory. "Board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I've drafted the temporary suspension notification as requested. It will be delivered electronically to Nathan upon his arrival in Lisbon. Are you certain about this course of action, Patricia?" I stared at the message, the reality of what I'd set in motion hitting me fully. For 35 years, I'd been the peacekeeper, the mediator, the one who smoothed things over. Never the one who initiated conflict. But this wasn't about conflict. This was about consequences. "Yes, I'm certain. Please proceed as planned." I sent the reply before I could second-guess myself. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. "Very well. I've also taken the liberty of transferring $50,000 to your personal account for immediate expenses. The corporate credit cards Nathan arranged for this trip may be compromised if he chooses to retaliate. Better to be prepared." Gregory's foresight surprised me. I hadn't even considered that Nathan might try to strand us financially as well. The thought solidified my resolve. "Thank you, Gregory. What time will it be in Lisbon when Nathan receives the notification?" "Approximately 2 p.m. local time tomorrow. His flight lands at 1:45 p.m. I could picture it clearly. Nathan strolling through Lisbon airport, smug and self-satisfied after his comfortable first-class flight, perhaps already planning which luxury restaurant to visit first. Then the notification. The shock, the disbelief that his doormat mother had actually taken action. Perfect. Please keep me updated. I set my phone aside and went to check on Michael. He was already in bed, his weighted blanket pulled up to his chin, scrolling through pictures of ocean waves on his tablet. "Tomorrow?" he asked when he saw me. "Yes, Michael. Tomorrow we'll see the real waves." His smile, rare and precious, lit up his entire face. "Good night, Mom. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. More than all the waves in all the oceans." It was our bedtime ritual, unchanged since he was a little boy. After he fell asleep, I sat on the balcony of our suite, looking out at the sparkling cityscape of São Paulo. So different from our quiet suburban life in Connecticut. So far from anything familiar. Yet instead of fear, I felt something unexpected. Possibility. As if Nathan's cruel abandonment had somehow freed me from invisible chains I'd worn for decades. I thought about the board meeting tomorrow. about the directors who had known Edward, who had watched Nathan take increasingly aggressive control of the company since his father's death, about the decisions I'd allowed to happen by staying silent. No more silence. My phone buzzed with one final message from Gregory. Legal team advises you to document everything regarding Nathan's abandonment of you and Michael in Brazil. Could be relevant if this becomes a lengthy dispute. I hadn't even considered that angle. Nathan wouldn't go quietly. That much I knew. He'd fight, claim I was incompetent, perhaps even try to use Michael's condition against me somehow. I opened my notes app and began typing, documenting every detail of what had happened at the airport. The verbal exchange, the abandonment, Michael's condition at the time, my desperate call to Gregory. When I finished, I felt drained, but resolved. Tomorrow would bring Nathan's reckoning, and the beginning of my own awakening. I checked on Michael one more time before going to bed myself. He had fallen asleep with his tablet still clutched in his hand, ocean waves playing silently on the screen. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, gently removing the device and placing it on his nightstand. Both of us. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized something that should have terrified me, but instead felt strangely liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. No carefully managed schedule, no predetermined path, just the wide-open possibility of finally discovering who Patricia Winters could be when she stopped living for everyone else. Morning in São Paulo arrived with a cascade of golden light through our hotel suite windows. I woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was until Michael's familiar morning routine sounds brought reality rushing back. The gentle tapping of his toothbrush against the sink, always 17 taps, no more, no less. The soft humming as he meticulously arranged his clothes for the day. The predictable rhythm of his movements that had shaped my life for decades. I checked my watch, 7:55 a.m. In just over an hour, the Winters Technology Solutions Board would convene virtually to discuss my son's future with the company. My son. The thought sent a pang through my chest. Not just because of Nathan's cruelty yesterday, but because of the choice I now faced. Could I really do this? Could I, the perpetual peacemaker, the woman who had spent her entire adult life avoiding conflict, actually strip my firstborn of his position, his identity? My phone chimed with a text from Gregory. Meeting link sent to your email. Technical assistant will call your room in 30 minutes to help set up. All 8 board members confirmed attendance. No turning back now. Michael, I called softly. Breakfast is here. Room service had delivered precisely at 8 a.m. as requested, another item checked off on the visual schedule Teresa had created. He emerged from the bathroom, hair neatly combed, wearing the blue polo shirt and khaki shorts he had selected the night before. Eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, he recited, naming his standard breakfast in the exact order he would eat it. That's right, sweetheart. And after breakfast, remember I have an important meeting. Teresa will come stay with you in the suite. Michael nodded, accepting this change to our routine with surprising ease. Then the beach? Then the beach, I confirmed, marveling at his adaptability. For someone who typically struggled with unexpected changes, Michael was handling this disruption to our lives with remarkable grace. Perhaps because, unlike his brother, he trusted me completely to keep him safe. The technical assistant arrived precisely on time, a young Brazilian man named Felipe, who efficiently connected my laptop to the secure meeting platform. You're all set, Mrs. Winters. Just click this icon 5 minutes before the meeting starts. The board members will already be gathered. Thank you, Felipe. I smoothed my silk blouse, grateful I'd packed one business-appropriate outfit for our planned visits to art galleries in Lisbon. Can you tell me anything about how these meetings usually go? I've never attended one before. Felipe looked surprised. Never? But you are majority shareholder, no? Yes, but my husband, and then my son, always handled the business matters. Something like sympathy flashed in Felipe's eyes. The meetings are very formal. Mr. Winters, your son, he runs them with, how do you say, iron hand? An iron fist, I corrected gently. Yes, this. Very strict, very fast. Not much discussion. Felipe hesitated. Some board members, they try to speak, but Nathan doesn't let them? He nodded, looking uncomfortable at speaking ill of the CEO. Thank you, Felipe. That's helpful to know. After he left, I spent the remaining time reviewing the company documents Gregory had sent overnight. Financial statements, recent major decisions, board member profiles. Information I should have been familiar with years ago. Edward had always tried to involve me in the business, but I'd been so consumed with Michael's needs that I'd abdicated that responsibility entirely. The realization made me wince. Perhaps Nathan's resentment wasn't entirely without foundation. At 8:55 a.m., Teresa arrived to stay with Michael. At 9 Surisas a.m. sharp, I clicked the meeting icon, heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would be audible through the microphone. 8 faces appeared on my screen, arranged in a grid. 6 men and 2 women, all in their 50s or 60s, all with the polished, prosperous look of successful executives. I recognized a few from Edward's funeral, but most were strangers to me. Mrs. Winters, Gregory's familiar face filled the center square. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, as you've been informed, this emergency meeting has been called by Patricia Winters, majority shareholder of Winters Technology Solutions, to address concerns regarding current company leadership. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the virtual room. Clearly, despite the meeting notification, they hadn't expected me to actually appear. Before we begin, Gregory continued, I should note for the record that CEO Nathan Winters was invited to this meeting, but is currently unreachable, presumably in transit to Portugal. What exactly is this about? Demanded a silver-haired man I recognized as Richard Harmon, one of Edward's oldest friends and business associates. Where is Nathan? I took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera. Mr. Harmon, members of the board, thank you for convening on such short notice. Yesterday, while on a family vacation, my son Nathan abandoned me and his autistic brother Michael at São Paulo International Airport in Brazil, leaving us stranded in a foreign country where we don't speak the language. The shocked silence was almost comical. These people knew Nathan as the brilliant, charismatic CEO who had increased company profits by 32% in 5 years. They didn't know him as the son who could coldly walk away from his vulnerable family when they became inconvenient. I'm very sorry to hear that, Patricia, said Janet Lowell, the only board member I knew well. She and her husband had been dinner guests in our home many times during Edward's life. But with all due respect, why does a personal family matter require an emergency board meeting? Because it's not just a personal matter, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Nathan's abandonment of his family responsibilities is part of a pattern of behavior that I believe extends to his management of this company, a pattern of prioritizing personal convenience and control over ethics and responsibility. I shared my screen to display the financial documents Gregory had highlighted. Over the past 3 years, Nathan has systematically concentrated decision-making authority, eliminated oversight measures Edward put in place, and marginalized board members who questioned his strategies. Richard Harmon's bushy eyebrows drew together. These are serious allegations, Patricia. They're documented facts, Richard. I navigated through the spreadsheets Gregory had prepared. Company funds used for personal expenses. Decisions made without required board approval. Removal of long-standing employees who were loyal to Edward's vision. The silence now had a different quality, more thoughtful, less shocked. As majority shareholder, I continued, I am exercising my right to temporarily suspend Nathan Winters from his position as CEO pending a full investigation of these matters. Gregory has prepared the necessary legal documents which require board ratification. Janet Lowell leaned forward. And who would run the company during this investigation? I met her gaze steadily. I would, with the board's guidance and Gregory's assistance, until a suitable interim CEO can be appointed. The laugh that erupted from Richard Harmon felt like a slap. You? Patricia, forgive me, but you've never shown the slightest interest in this company. You don't have the experience or the knowledge to— I have a PhD in applied mathematics, Richard, I interrupted quietly. Before I put my career aside to care for Michael, I was on track to become department chair at MIT. I may have chosen family over career, but don't mistake that choice for incapability. The stunned silence returned. Even Gregory looked surprised. I'd never mentioned my academic background to him, and Nathan had apparently never thought it worth sharing either. What I lack in recent business experience, I continued into the silence, I make up for in integrity and commitment to Edward's original vision for this company, something I fear has been lost under Nathan's leadership. Janet Lowell was the first to recover. I moved to approve the temporary suspension of Nathan Winters as CEO, pending investigation of the financial irregularities presented by Mrs. Winters. I second, said a younger board member I didn't recognize. Gregory, shifting smoothly into his role as corporate counsel, called for the vote. All in favor? One by one, hands raised across the digital squares. 6, 7, all 8 board members. The motion passes unanimously, Gregory announced. Nathan Winters is hereby suspended as CEO of Winters Technology Solutions, effective immediately. All company access and privileges are temporarily revoked pending investigation. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what had just occurred. In less than 20 minutes, I had fundamentally altered the course of my son's life and taken on a responsibility I had avoided for decades. The notification will be sent to Nathan's devices immediately, Gregory informed the board. I suggest we reconvene in 48 hours to discuss interim leadership structure and investigation parameters. As the meeting concluded and the faces blinked off my screen one by one, I sat motionless, staring at my reflection in the now dark display. Who was this woman looking back at me? This woman who had just taken control of a multi-million-dollar technology company while sitting in a hotel room in Brazil? A soft knock at the door broke my trance. Teresa peeked in. All finished, Mrs. Winters? Michael is very excited about the beach. Yes, I said, closing my laptop with a decisive click. We're going to the beach. As I changed into more casual clothes, my phone chimed with a message from Gregory. Notification delivered to Nathan's devices. His plane landed in Lisbon 10 minutes ago. I pictured Nathan turning on his phone as the plane taxied to the gate, expecting nothing more consequential than some emails and perhaps a worried text from me. Instead, he would find himself suddenly cut off from the company he had come to see as his birthright. Actions have consequences. It was a lesson I should have taught him long ago. Another chime. Incoming call from Nathan. Shall I direct it to your voicemail? I considered for a moment, then replied, No, I'll speak with him, but not until after I've taken Michael to see the ocean. My son, my other son, has waited long enough for his turn to come first. It's so big. Michael's voice carried a rare note of excitement as we stood at the edge of Praia de Santos, about an hour's drive from São Paulo. His eyes, usually guarded and focused inward, were wide with wonder as he stared at the endless expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. I had expected to take him to one of the urban beaches near our hotel, but Teresa had suggested this day trip instead. Much more tranquil, she'd explained. Better for someone who doesn't like crowds. She was right. Though not empty, the beach was spacious enough that Michael didn't feel overwhelmed by other people. The rhythmic crashing of waves seemed to soothe him, providing the kind of predictable pattern his mind craved. Can I touch it? He asked, already slipping off his shoes. Of course, sweetheart. Just stay where I can see you. I watched from a nearby beach chair as my 33-year-old son approached the water with the cautious wonder of a child. He let the waves wash over his feet, jumping back at first, then laughing as he grew accustomed to the sensation. Simple joy, something I'd fought so hard to give him throughout his life, often at the expense of everything else. My phone, which I'd silenced after the board meeting, vibrated persistently in my bag. Nathan, undoubtedly. I could imagine his rage, his disbelief, his frantic calls to allies on the board, only to discover they had unanimously supported his suspension. The thought brought no satisfaction, only a deep sadness that our relationship had deteriorated to this point. After the 5th call in 20 minutes, I finally retrieved the phone, bracing myself for the confrontation to come. 16 missed calls, 27 text messages, all from Nathan. I scanned the texts, watching them evolve from confusion to outrage. Mom, what's going on? Got some weird notification about my company access. Is this a mistake? Call me ASAP. Just spoke to Gregory. What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't do this. You don't know the first thing about running the company. This is about yesterday, isn't it? You're punishing me for leaving you at the airport. Grow up. Answer your damn phone. You've just destroyed everything Dad built. Hope you're happy. The final message, sent just 5 minutes ago, was simply, "This isn't over." I set the phone down, strangely calm despite the vitriol. The old Patricia would have been devastated by Nathan's anger, would have immediately called to apologize, to find a way to smooth things over. But that Patricia had been left behind at the São Paulo airport, abandoned just as surely as her physical self had been. "Mom, look!" Michael called, drawing my attention back to the present. He was standing ankle-deep in the surf, pointing excitedly as a wave rolled in. He jumped just as it reached him, landing with a splash and a delighted laugh that carried across the beach. Seeing my reserved, often anxious son so free, so present in his body and the moment, brought tears to my eyes. When was the last time I'd seen him this happy? When was the last time I'd allowed myself to simply enjoy his happiness, rather than mentally cataloging therapies, medications, potential triggers? I slipped off my own shoes and joined him at the water's edge. The cool Atlantic lapped at my feet, sand shifting beneath my toes. "It pulls and pushes," Michael observed, his analytical mind always working. "Like breathing." "Yes," I agreed, seeing the ocean through his eyes. "Exactly like breathing." We stayed like that for nearly an hour, Michael experimenting with different depths, me keeping a watchful but not hovering presence nearby. When hunger finally drew us back to shore, we found Teresa had arranged a small picnic from a local vendor. Fresh fruit, cheese, bread, and water. As we ate, my phone vibrated again. Not Nathan this time, but Gregory. "I should take this," I told Michael, who nodded, focused on carefully separating his cheese from his fruit. "Patricia," Gregory's voice was tense when I answered. "Nathan's on his way back to Sao Paulo. He's booked on the next available flight from Lisbon." My stomach tightened. "When does he arrive?" "Tomorrow morning around 6 a.m. He's not taking this well. He's already contacted 3 board members directly, trying to reverse the suspension." "Successfully?" "No, not yet. But Patricia," Gregory's voice lowered, "he's making threats, saying he'll contest Edward's will, claim you're mentally incompetent, that your focus on Michael has made you unable to make sound business decisions." The old fear flickered briefly. Fear of conflict, of disapproval, of failing to keep everyone happy. I pushed it aside, watching Michael methodically eat his lunch, at peace here, in this unexpected place. "Let him try," I said quietly. "I've spent 33 years advocating for Michael against doctors, schools, and social systems that wanted to write him off as less than fully human. Nathan doesn't stand a chance." Gregory's surprised laugh carried through the phone. "I'm beginning to see where Nathan gets his determination, though he applies it rather differently. What should I do when he arrives?" "That depends," Gregory replied. "What outcome are you hoping for here, Patricia? Do you want to punish Nathan? Reform him? Remove him permanently from the company?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I'd acted on impulse, out of anger and hurt when Nathan abandoned us. But now, with the immediate crisis past, what was my actual goal? "I want him to understand that actions have consequences," I said slowly. "That he can't treat people, family or employees, as disposable when they become inconvenient. But I don't want to destroy him, Gregory. He's still my son." "Then I suggest neutral territory for your meeting. Not your hotel, not anywhere he controls. Somewhere public but private enough for a frank conversation." "I'll think about it," I promised, ending the call. The rest of our afternoon passed peacefully. Michael collected shells, arranging them in precise patterns on the sand. I alternated between watching him and jotting notes in a small notebook I'd purchased at the hotel gift shop. Thoughts about the company, questions for the next board meeting, ideas for changes I might implement during my temporary leadership. By the time we returned to the hotel that evening, Michael was pleasantly exhausted, falling asleep almost immediately after his nighttime routine. I sat on the balcony again, contemplating the vibrant city lights and the confrontation to come. My phone chimed with an email from Gregory, containing a detailed agenda for tomorrow's executive briefing. I would need to meet virtually with the company's senior leadership team, people who had reported to Nathan, who might resent my sudden authority or question my competence. The old Patricia would have been terrified, would have probably called Nathan immediately, begged his forgiveness, rescinded the suspension. Anything to avoid having to step into that spotlight, to risk judgment and potential failure. But the woman who had stood at the edge of the Atlantic today, watching her autistic son find joy in the waves, was different, changed not just by Nathan's betrayal, but by the realization of her own untapped strength. I reviewed Gregory's agenda, making notes and adjustments. Then I composed a brief message to the senior leadership team, introducing myself not as Nathan's mother or Edward's widow, but as the acting CEO of Winters Technology Solutions. After sending it, I opened my contacts and found the number for the Brazilian woman Teresa had mentioned, a music therapist who worked with autistic clients in Sao Paulo. I sent her a message asking about a possible session for Michael tomorrow. As I prepared for bed, I realized I'd made a decision without consciously intending to. We would not be following Nathan to Portugal when our rescheduled flight departed in 2 days. We would stay here in Brazil, at least for now, creating our own journey rather than following the path Nathan had prescribed. My final act before sleep was to set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. When Nathan's plane landed in São Paulo, I would be ready, not hiding, not apologizing, but meeting him as an equal for perhaps the first time in our relationship. The Patricia who had raised him might have been a doormat, but the Patricia who would greet him tomorrow was becoming something entirely different. A woman who had finally found her voice, her power, and her courage in the most unexpected of places. The hotel lobby at 6:45 a.m. was sparsely populated. A few business travelers with early meetings, staff refreshing coffee stations, a lone pianist practicing softly in the corner. I'd chosen this public yet private space deliberately, following Gregory's advice about neutral territory. The grand piano's gentle notes provided both ambience and a buffer against eavesdropping. I'd slept poorly, rehearsing confrontations in my mind, imagining Nathan's accusations and my responses. By dawn, I'd settled on a strategy, calm, firm, and focused on actions rather than emotions. No matter how Nathan tried to provoke me, I would not allow myself to be dragged into the familiar pattern of placating his anger. Michael was still sleeping peacefully upstairs, with Teresa arriving at 7 to stay with him during what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. I'd laid out his favorite breakfast foods, left his tablet cued to his morning playlist, and written a note explaining I had an important meeting, but would return for our scheduled music therapy appointment at 10 Ilio. These small acts of organization had always been my way of controlling anxiety, creating structure in potentially chaotic situations. The habit served me well now, allowing me to appear outwardly composed despite the turmoil within. At precisely 7 a.m., Nathan strode through the hotel's revolving door. Even after an overnight transatlantic flight, he looked immaculate in tailored trousers and a button-down shirt, his carry-on suitcase rolling smoothly behind him. His eyes scanned the lobby with the practiced efficiency of a predator, landing on me with laser focus. I raised my coffee cup slightly in acknowledgement, neither standing to greet him nor waving him over. A small assertion of power. He would come to me. His expression darkened as he approached, the muscle in his jaw twitching with barely contained fury. "You've lost your mind," he said by way of greeting, dropping into the chair across from me. "Completely lost it." I took a deliberate sip of coffee before responding. "Good morning to you too, Nathan. How was Portugal?" "Don't." He sliced his hand through the air. "Don't do this passive-aggressive routine. You know exactly what you've done. 35 years I've worked for that company." "5." I corrected quietly. "You've worked there 5 years since your father died, and it was hardly work when you started as vice president based solely on your last name." His eyes widened at my interruption. I'd never spoken to him this way before. "This is about yesterday, isn't it?" he demanded. "One moment of frustration after years, decades, of putting up with your obsession with Michael, and you decide to destroy my career?" "This isn't about yesterday," I replied evenly. "Yesterday was simply the final evidence I needed that you lack the character to lead your father's company. Your abandonment of us was cruel, Nathan, but it was also revealing. It showed me exactly who you are when things get difficult." "And who is that, Mother?" The word dripped with sarcasm. "Someone who discards people when they become inconvenient. Someone who values control over compassion. Someone who has forgotten that leadership requires responsibility, not just authority." I leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, how many employees have you fired since taking over as CEO?" The question threw him. "What? I don't know exactly. Maybe 40 or 50. What does that have to do with anything?" "And how many of those were people who had been with the company since your father's early days? People who knew his vision intimately?" His eyes narrowed. The old guard was resistant to necessary changes. Dad was brilliant but sentimental. He kept people out of loyalty even when they weren't performing. Interesting. I sipped my coffee again. Because when I reviewed the performance metrics of those terminated employees, many were exceeding targets. They just happened to be people who questioned your methods or remembered how your father would have handled situations. "You've been CEO for what? 24 hours? You don't know what you're talking about." "I've been majority shareholder since your father died, Nathan. I just never exercised my authority because I trusted you to honor his legacy." I set my cup down with a decisive click. That was my mistake. One I'm now correcting. Nathan's face flushed with anger, but a calculated look replaced his initial rage. He glanced around the lobby, then lowered his voice. What do you want, Mother? Money? A formal apology for yesterday? What will it take to end this ridiculous power play? This isn't a negotiation, I replied. The board has unanimously approved your temporary suspension pending investigation. That investigation will proceed regardless of what happens between us personally. The board can be persuaded, he said dismissively. Once they realize you're doing this out of some misguided maternal vengeance. They've seen the financial records, Nathan. The unauthorized bonuses you awarded yourself. The elimination of oversight protocols. The questionable acquisitions of companies owned by your fraternity brothers. I held his gaze steadily. Your father built that company on integrity as much as innovation. How do you think he would feel about what you've done with his legacy? The mention of Edward struck home. For a moment, Nathan looked like the little boy who had idolized his father, who had followed him around the house, mimicking his posture and expressions. Then the corporate mask slipped back into place. You want to talk about legacy? His voice hardened. What about Michael? What happens to him when you're gone? You've enabled his dependence for 33 years instead of pushing him toward independence. Who's going to care for him when you die? Me? After this? The calculated cruelty of targeting my deepest fear, Michael's future without me, momentarily stole my breath. This was Nathan's familiar tactic. Identify weakness, exploit mercilessly. It had worked countless times before. Not today. Michael's future is secured, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Your father and I established a trust specifically for his care, managed by independent trustees, not dependent on your goodwill. As for his dependence, did you know he's adapted to our unexpected Brazilian adventure with more flexibility than you've shown about your temporary suspension? Nathan blinked, thrown off balance by my calm rebuttal. This morning, I continued, he asked our hotel concierge, in carefully practiced Portuguese, for directions to the music room. The same son you dismiss as hopelessly dependent is currently teaching himself a new language because it interests him. Congratulations, he can find a piano. That hardly qualifies him for independent living. No one is suggesting it does, but your constant underestimation of his capabilities says more about your limitations than his. I glanced at my watch. I have an executive briefing in 30 minutes. What is it you hope to accomplish with this conversation, Nathan? He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. This unfamiliar mother who didn't cower, apologize, or seek to smooth his ruffled feathers. I want my company back, he said finally. I've worked too hard to have it taken away on your sentimental whim. It was never your company, I corrected gently. It was your father's vision, built with the support of hundreds of talented people, many of whom you've systematically pushed aside. If the investigation shows you've been a responsible steward of that legacy, you'll be reinstated. If not, I shrugged. Actions have consequences. And what about your actions? He demanded. What about the consequences of turning against your own son? I haven't turned against you, Nathan. I've simply stopped enabling behavior that dishonors your father's memory and your own potential. I stood, gathering my purse and the folder of documents I'd brought to review before my meeting. You're welcome to stay in São Paulo, of course, but Michael and I will be continuing our vacation without you. Where? The question escaped before he could mask his surprise. We haven't decided yet. Maybe Rio. Michael expressed interest in the music scene there. I allowed myself a small smile. It turns out, travel agrees with both of us, now that we're free to move at our own pace without judgment. As I turned to leave, Nathan called after me. This isn't over, Mother. I paused, looking back at my firstborn, the baby I had held with such hope, the boy I had raised with such pride, the man who had become increasingly unrecognizable to me. In his eyes, I saw not just anger but fear of losing the identity and power he'd come to define himself by. No, I agreed softly. It isn't over, but it is changed, Nathan. Everything is changed now. The minor chord sounds sad, Michael observed, his long fingers resting thoughtfully on the grand piano keys. But not bad sad, beautiful sad. That's exactly right, replied Gabriella, the music therapist Teresa had connected us with. Emotions in music are complex, just like emotions in people. I watched from a comfortable chair in the corner of the hotel's music room, marveling at the easy rapport between them. Gabriella had approached Michael with respectful patience. allowing him to establish his own boundaries rather than imposing arbitrary expectations. Within 20 minutes, they were engaged in a flowing conversation about music theory that occasionally stretched beyond my comprehension. The executive briefing I'd conducted earlier had gone surprisingly well. The senior leadership team, initially wary of this unknown quantity suddenly placed in charge, had warmed considerably when I asked thoughtful questions about their departments rather than issuing immediate directives. My academic background had proven unexpectedly relevant. The analytical skills honed during my mathematics career transferred readily to business strategy. Now, watching Michael absorbed in musical exploration, I felt a sense of parallel awakening. Both of us discovering capabilities long dormant, stepping into new versions of ourselves, far from the constrained roles we'd occupied at home. My phone vibrated with an incoming call from Gregory. I slipped outside to answer, not wanting to disturb Michael's session. "The investigation team has made some preliminary findings," Gregory said without preamble. "It's worse than we initially thought, Patricia. Nathan hasn't just been playing fast and loose with corporate governance. He's been systematically dismantling the ethical framework Edward built into the company." I leaned against the wall, absorbing this. Specifics? Patent infringement cover-ups, aggressive tax avoidance schemes that border on evasion, termination of whistleblowers under the guise of performance issues. Gregory's voice tightened. And concerning personal behavior. Multiple complaints from female employees about inappropriate comments and pressured dinner invitations, all quietly settled with NDAs and severance packages. I closed my eyes, a wave of disappointment washing over me. Not just professional misconduct, but personal moral failures as well. What had happened to the boy who had once insisted on returning a cashier's overly generous change? Who had defended smaller children from playground bullies? When did he become this person, Gregory? "I don't know," he replied gently. "But the board needs direction on how to proceed. These findings could justify permanent removal, possibly even criminal charges in some instances. The maternal instinct to protect warred with my responsibility to the company and its employees." "What would Edward have done?" I asked finally. "Edward was unflinchingly ethical in business," Gregory said without hesitation. "He would have prioritized accountability and the company's integrity over family loyalty in this situation." I watched through the glass door as Michael played a complex sequence, his face alight with concentration and joy. My younger son, so often underestimated, blossoming when given the right environment and support. What might Nathan have become with different choices, with the courage to face his own weaknesses rather than weaponizing power to mask them? "Schedule a full board meeting for tomorrow," I decided. "I want to review all evidence personally before making any recommendations about permanent action." After ending the call, I returned to the music room, where Gabriella was explaining chord progressions using colored cards, a visual system she'd developed specifically for neurodivergent students. "Mom," Michael called when he noticed me, "listen to what I made." He played a hauntingly beautiful sequence, simple yet emotionally resonant. His own composition, Gabriella explained proudly. His first. "It's beautiful, Michael," I said, meaning it completely. "I'm calling it Brazil Waves," he announced, "for the ocean yesterday." My heart swelled with a fierce pride entirely different from the anxious hovering that had characterized so much of my parenting. This was pride in witnessing Michael become more fully himself, not in managing his behavior to meet external expectations. Later, as we enjoyed lunch at an outdoor cafe Teresa had recommended, Michael asked the question I'd been dreading. "Is Nathan still mad?" I set down my fork, considering how to answer honestly without burdening him with adult complications. "Yes, sweetheart. Nathan is still angry about some decisions I've made." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "He gets mad a lot. At me, especially." The simple observation pierced my heart. I'd worked so hard to buffer Michael from Nathan's impatience, making excuses, smoothing interactions. Had I really believed he didn't notice? "I'm sorry about that," I said carefully. "Nathan's anger isn't your fault. It's something he needs to learn to manage better. Like how I learned to manage loud noises with my headphones." "Exactly like that," I agreed, struck by the apt comparison. Everyone has challenges. The important thing is learning healthy ways to handle them. "Will we see Nathan again on this trip?" Michael's tone was merely curious, without anxiety. "I don't think so. We're going to continue our vacation without him." I watched his face carefully. "How do you feel about that?" He considered the question with his characteristic thoroughness. Good, he said finally. It's more peaceful without him, and you smile more. His perception startled me. Had I smiled so rarely before? Had the constant tension of mediating between my sons become so normal that its absence was noteworthy even to Michael? Where should we go next? I asked, changing the subject to more positive territory. Rio, Michael said immediately. They have music everywhere in Rio, and a big statue on a mountain. Christ the Redeemer, I nodded. You've been researching. He tapped his tablet, which he'd placed carefully beside his plate. 38 meters tall, built in 1931. You can see the whole city from there. The old Patricia would have hesitated, would have worried about managing Michael's sensory issues in a bustling city like Rio, would have defaulted to safer, more predictable options. The new Patricia simply smiled and said, Rio sounds perfect. That evening, I arranged our travel to Rio de Janeiro, while Michael organized his growing collection of seashells from our beach visits. The easy companionship between us felt novel, mother and son simply existing together, each engaged in our own activities but connected by comfortable silence. My phone chimed with an email notification. The complete investigation report from the team Gregory had assembled. 178 pages documenting Nathan's professional and ethical failures in meticulous detail. Evidence that would almost certainly end his career at Winters Technology if presented to the board in its entirety. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a profound sadness for the promising young man Nathan had once been, for the leader he could have become under different circumstances. Had I contributed to his moral decline by enabling his worst qualities, by always stepping in to clean up his messes, smooth over his offenses, excuse his selfishness? As Michael's mother, I had fought tirelessly against a world determined to underestimate him, to dismiss his worth based on his differences. Had I failed Nathan equally by never demanding he live up to his potential for compassion and integrity? Mom? Michael's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Are you sad? I looked up to find him watching me intently, his head tilted in the way that signaled genuine concern rather than mere curiosity. A little, I admitted. I'm thinking about some difficult decisions I need to make. He nodded, processing this. Then, with careful movements, he selected one of his seashells, a perfect spiral in cream and gold, and placed it in my hand. For your collection, he said seriously. Everyone needs beautiful things when they're sad. I closed my fingers around the shell, this simple gift carrying more meaning than any expensive present Nathan had ever given me. Thank you, Michael. It helps. And somehow, it did. The small, perfect spiral in my palm reminded me that growth often happens in barely perceptible increments, that transformation follows natural patterns, that beauty emerges from the accumulated wisdom of navigating life's currents. Whatever decisions tomorrow would bring regarding Nathan's future with the company, I would approach them with the same spiraling growth, moving forward while carrying the lessons of the past, seeking the pattern that honored both justice and compassion. Rio de Janeiro unfolded before us in a panorama of impossible beauty. From our vantage point near the feet of Christ the Redeemer, the city sprawled below, a tapestry of urban density nestled between lush mountains and sparkling ocean. Michael stood transfixed, his hands gripping the railing, eyes wide with wonder. It's so much, he whispered, not in the overwhelmed way that usually preceded a sensory meltdown, but with genuine awe. So much beautiful. Yes, I agreed, standing beside him. It's almost too beautiful to take in all at once. We had arrived in Rio the previous evening, settling into a boutique hotel in Ipanema that Gabriela had recommended as both luxurious and sensory-friendly. Michael had fallen asleep immediately after our late dinner, but I had spent hours reviewing the investigation documents, preparing for the board meeting that would determine Nathan's professional fate. The evidence was damning, comprehensive, and unambiguous. Nathan hadn't merely bent ethical guidelines, he had systematically violated core principles upon which Edward had built the company. The patents he had infringed belonged to small developers who couldn't afford protracted legal battles. The employees he had silenced included women who had endured his inappropriate advances and dedicated workers who had questioned his most ethically dubious decisions. In the harsh light of these revelations, my maternal instinct to protect him seemed increasingly misguided. The board would expect a recommendation from me as acting CEO and majority shareholder. the company's future, its ethical foundation, and the livelihoods of hundreds of employees now rested in my hands. "Look, Mom!" Michael pointed to a hang glider soaring from one of the nearby peaks. "He's flying." The brightly colored wing caught thermal currents, carrying its passenger in graceful arcs above the cityscape. Freedom and risk in perfect balance. "Breathtaking," I agreed, struck by the metaphor it presented. Safety came not from avoiding heights, but from having the right equipment and understanding the currents. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a reminder that the board meeting would begin in 30 minutes. I had arranged for a hotel staff member to accompany Michael on a guided tour of the botanical gardens while I handled this difficult business. "Michael, I need to take my meeting now. Remember Jerome will take you to see the giant water lilies and exotic birds?" He nodded, his gaze still following the hang glider's path. "I'll take pictures to show you." "I'd love that." I squeezed his shoulder gently. "I'll meet you for a late lunch after my meeting." Back at the hotel, I settled at the desk in our suite, laptop open to the secure meeting platform. My reflection in the screen showed a woman transformed from the timid mother who had landed in Brazil less than a week ago. My posture straighter, my expression more assured, my eyes clearer. Even my silver-streaked hair, which I'd always carefully colored at Nathan's insistence that it made me look old, now hung in a natural bob that framed my face with surprising flattery. At exactly 10 a.m., I clicked into the board meeting. 8 familiar faces appeared on screen, along with Gregory and 2 members of the investigation team. After brief greetings, I launched directly into the purpose of our gathering. "I've reviewed the complete findings regarding Nathan's leadership," I began, my voice steady. "The evidence presents a clear pattern of ethical violations, legal transgressions, and personal misconduct that fundamentally contradicts the values upon which Winter's Technology Solutions was built." I shared my screen to display key points from the investigation, walking the board through the most significant issues without flinching from hard truths. No excuses, no motherly softening of Nathan's actions, just facts, presented with the analytical clarity that had once made me a promising mathematician. Based on these findings, I concluded after nearly 40 minutes of detailed presentation, I believe the board has sufficient cause to terminate Nathan Winters permanently from his position as CEO and to remove him from any role within the company. Richard Harmon, who had scoffed at my capability just days ago, was the first to respond. "The evidence is unquestionably serious, Patricia, but he is your son. Are you certain you want to recommend such definitive action?" The question was fair, asked without condescension, the same question I had wrestled with throughout the night. "Nathan is indeed my son," I acknowledged, "and as his mother, I bear some responsibility for the man he has become. Perhaps, if I had established clearer boundaries years ago, if I had demanded accountability rather than making excuses for his behavior, we wouldn't be facing this situation today." I paused, gathering my thoughts. But Winter's Technology isn't just a family business. It's the livelihood of hundreds of employees. It's the legacy of Edward's vision for ethical innovation. My personal feelings, my maternal instincts, these cannot supersede my responsibility to the company and the principles it was founded upon. Janet Lowell nodded slowly. "Well said, Patricia. What do you propose as next steps?" "A formal termination effective immediately," I replied. "Removal from the board of directors. Legal counsel should evaluate which violations may require reporting to regulatory authorities." I took a breath before adding, "and a personal trust fund established for Nathan, separate from company assets. My son has made grievous mistakes, but I won't see him destitute while he hopefully rebuilds his life on better principles." The vote was unanimous, though I saw the compassion in several board members' eyes as they cast their ballots. Not pity, but genuine recognition of the painful position I faced as both mother and company leader. Gregory would handle the formal notification to Nathan. I had insisted on including a letter from me, not apologizing for the consequences of his actions, but expressing my hope that this reckoning might ultimately lead him toward becoming the man his father had believed he could be. As the meeting concluded, Richard Harmon remained on the call after others had disconnected. "Patricia, I owe you an apology. I severely underestimated you." "Thank you, Richard, but no apology is necessary. I underestimated myself for most of my adult life." I smiled faintly. "It took being abandoned in a foreign country to discover what I'm capable of. Edward always said you were the most brilliant person he'd ever met, Richard said. He would be proud of how you've protected his company and how you've grown. After we disconnected, I sat motionless, absorbing the magnitude of what had just transpired. I had effectively ended my son's career. The relationship between us, already damaged, might never recover from this final rupture. Yet alongside the sadness ran a thread of something else. Not satisfaction in Nathan's downfall, but pride in my own integrity. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had made a decision based not on keeping peace or pleasing others, but on what I genuinely believed was right. My phone chimed with incoming photos from Michael's botanical garden tour. Giant lily pads, exotic flowers, a brilliantly colored toucan perched on a branch. Simple joys captured through his unique perspective. Looking at these images, I felt a strange lightness despite the weight of the morning's decision. Nathan's future was now his to determine. Michael was flourishing in ways I had never imagined possible. And I, Patricia Winters, widow, mother, mathematician, reluctant CEO, was finally becoming the woman I might have been all along, had I not surrendered my identity so completely to others' needs and expectations. I texted Michael, "Beautiful photos. Looking forward to lunch. What kind of food would you like?" His reply came quickly. "Brazilian barbecue. João says it's the best, and I want to try the fruit juice with acai." I smiled at his newfound adventurousness with food, historically one of his most rigid areas. "Sounds perfect. See you at 1:1. As I prepared to meet my younger son, I realized the board meeting had given me clarity about another decision as well. It was time to find a new permanent CEO for Winters Technology, someone with both the business acumen and ethical foundation to honor Edward's legacy. My own future lay elsewhere, in a direction I was only beginning to glimpse, but that filled me with unexpected excitement. First, though, there was Brazilian barbecue to enjoy, and a son's newfound joy to celebrate. The rest would unfold in its own time, each decision building on the last in a spiral of growth that had only just begun. The revelation came unexpectedly, as most important discoveries do. Michael and I were exploring the Lapa Steps, the colorful tiled staircase that winds through Rio's historic district, when he asked the question that would alter our course yet again. "Mom, can we live here?" I paused midway up the vibrant staircase, surrounded by tourists snapping photos of the artistic mosaic created by Chilean artist Jorge Celerón. "Here? You mean in Rio?" Michael nodded, his expression unusually earnest. "Not forever, but longer than vacation. I like it here." 2 weeks had passed since the board's decision to permanently remove Nathan from Winters Technology. 2 weeks of exploring Rio's contradictions, its sophisticated cultural offerings alongside its casual beach lifestyle, its opulent neighborhoods adjacent to humble communities. Michael had thrived in this environment of colorful stimulation, counterbalanced by peaceful retreats to our quiet hotel. "You really like it that much?" I asked, genuinely curious. My cautious, routine-loving son had historically resisted even minor changes to his environment. "The music is everywhere," he explained, gesturing broadly, "and people don't stare at me when I need my headphones, and—" he hesitated, selecting his words carefully. "I feel different here. More possible. More possible." The phrase struck me with its simple profundity. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been experiencing as well? An expansion of what seemed possible once removed from familiar constraints? "I'd need to think about logistics," I said, not dismissing the idea outright as I once might have done. "My responsibilities to the company, your therapy continuity, language barriers?" "I'm learning Portuguese," he reminded me, pulling out his tablet to display the language app he'd been diligently using. "And Gabriela said she has colleagues here in Rio who work with adults like me." The thoughtfulness behind his request surprised me. This wasn't an impulsive desire, but something he had been considering seriously. "Let me think about it," I promised. "It's a big decision." That evening, while Michael was engaged in an online music composition class Gabriela had arranged, I took a solitary walk along Ipanema Beach. The setting sun painted the water in shades of orange and gold, silhouetting the distinctive profiles of Two Brothers Mountain against the darkening sky. Could we really do this? Temporarily relocate to a foreign country where neither of us spoke the language fluently? The practical obstacles seemed formidable, yet none felt insurmountable with proper planning. My phone rang, Gregory calling with our now regular evening update on company matters. The board has narrowed the CEO search to 3 candidates, he reported, after initial pleasantries. They'd like your input before proceeding to final interviews. Send me their profiles, I replied, watching waves break against the shore in rhythmic percussion. I'll review them tomorrow. There's something else, Gregory continued, his tone shifting slightly. Nathan has requested a meeting with you. Not about the company. He seems to have accepted that decision, at least legally. He says it's personal, about your relationship moving forward. My chest tightened. In the weeks since his termination, Nathan had maintained complete silence toward me, despite my attempts to reach out. The professional separation had been necessary, but the maternal pain of estrangement remained acute. Did he say what specifically he wants to discuss? Only that he's been in therapy since the termination, at the suggestion of an old friend from MIT who apparently reached out after hearing what happened. He says he has things to tell you that can't be communicated properly long distance. Therapy. The word hung in the air, unexpected and hopeful. Nathan had always dismissed psychological support as weak and unnecessary. Edward's stoic influence manifesting in our son. He's willing to come to Brazil? I asked, surprised. Actually, he suggested meeting in New York next month. He's relocated there temporarily while figuring out his next professional steps. I considered this as I watched an elderly couple walking hand in hand along the shoreline, leaning slightly into one another for support. The image stirred something in me, a reminder that healing relationships requires both parties moving toward each other, meeting somewhere in the middle of their separate journeys. Tell him I'll consider it, I said finally. But first, I need to make a decision about something else. After ending the call, I returned to our hotel, my mind clearer than it had been in years. Michael looked up from his composition software as I entered our suite, his questioning gaze meeting mine. 3 months, I said without preamble. We'll stay in Rio for 3 months as a trial. If it works for both of us, we can consider a longer arrangement. His face lit with a smile of pure, unguarded joy, so rare and precious that it confirmed my decision instantly. When? He asked, already reaching for his tablet, likely to begin researching longer-term accommodations. We'll need about 2 weeks to arrange everything properly. I'll need to coordinate with the board about remote work, find us a suitable apartment, arrange for your therapy continuity. I already found apartments, he interrupted, showing me a carefully curated collection of rental listings. This one has a music room and is close to the beach but not too noisy. I laughed, delighted by his initiative. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Since the first week, he admitted. I've been making lists, pros and cons. And the pros won? He nodded solemnly. By a significant statistical margin. The mathematician in me appreciated his analytical approach. Show me these apartments then. Let's see which one might work for our extended stay. As Michael excitedly walked me through his research, I marveled at this new dimension of our relationship. No longer simply caretaker and dependent, we were becoming true partners in crafting our shared life. His needs remained significant, but so did his capabilities. Capabilities I had perhaps unconsciously limited by maintaining too protective an environment. The next morning, I woke early and slipped out to the balcony with my coffee, watching Rio come alive with the rising sun. Gregory had sent the CEO candidate profiles as promised, and I reviewed them with professional detachment, noting strengths and concerns for each. One candidate in particular stood out, Dr. Elaine Watkins, former MIT professor turned tech executive, whose emphasis on ethical innovation aligned closely with Edward's original vision. I sent my recommendation to the board, then opened a new email to Nathan. After multiple attempts and deletions, I settled on simple honesty. Nathan, Gregory mentioned your request to meet in New York next month. Michael and I have decided to extend our stay in Brazil for at least 3 months, so I won't be back in the States until after that period. However, if your desire to talk is genuine, I'm open to meeting you halfway, both literally and figuratively. I'll be in Miami on September 15th for a technology conference where I'm delivering the keynote address. If you're willing to come to Miami, I would make time to meet with you there. Whatever has happened between us professionally, you are still my son. That hasn't changed and won't change, regardless of the path each of us takes moving forward. Mom, I sent it before I could overthink the wording, then turned my attention to the practicalities of our extended stay. Apartment viewings to arrange, visa extensions to secure, remote work protocols to establish with the board. By mid-afternoon, Michael and I were meeting a rental agent at the apartment he had selected as his top choice, a spacious two-bedroom in Leblon with a small music room, walking distance to the beach, but situated on a quieter residential street. "It's perfect," Michael declared, after methodically inspecting each room, testing acoustics, light patterns, and ambient noise levels with the thoroughness that characterized his approach to important decisions. And it was perfect, not despite, but because of its differences from our Connecticut home. Sunlight streamed through large windows, painting the white walls with golden warmth. From the small balcony, we could see a slice of ocean between neighboring buildings. The gentle background hum of the city provided a constant but not overwhelming soundscape. "We'll take it," I told the agent, who seemed mildly surprised at our efficiency. As we completed the preliminary paperwork, my phone chimed with an email notification. Nathan, responding to my message with unexpected promptness. "Mom, Miami works. I'll be there. There are things I need to say to you, and probably more I need to hear from you. I'm not the same person who left you and Michael at that airport. I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to understand why I did it and how to become someone different. Nathan." I read the message twice, noting the absence of his usual defensiveness and deflection. Perhaps there was a bridge possible between us after all, not the automatic forgiveness he might have expected in the past, but something more considered. A relationship built on honesty rather than obligation. "Good news?" Michael asked, noticing my expression. "Potentially," I replied, tucking my phone away. "A bridge being built where I thought there was only empty space." He nodded as if this made perfect sense, turning his attention back to the sunlight dancing across the apartment floor. Bridges are important. They connect different places while still letting them be separate. As usual, my supposedly limited son had captured the essence of a complex emotional truth with beautiful simplicity. Nathan and I might never return to our former relationship, nor should we, given its unhealthy dynamics. But perhaps we could build something new, a connection that honored our separateness while acknowledging our enduring bond. For now, though, my focus remained on the immediate joy before me. Michael's excitement about our new temporary home, the adventure we were embarking on together, and the continuing revelation of who we both could become when freed from the constraints of others' expectations. "Are you nervous?" Michael asked as we navigated Miami International Airport, his keen perception once again cutting through my carefully maintained composure. "A little," I admitted, adjusting my silk scarf. After 3 months in Rio's casual atmosphere, the formal business attire I donned for the technology conference felt restrictive, almost like a costume from a former life. "Nathan might still be angry," Michael observed, keeping pace beside me through the crowded terminal. "But that doesn't mean you made the wrong choice." I glanced at him, struck anew by the wisdom that often emerged from his unique perspective. At 33, Michael had developed an emotional intelligence that surprised those who underestimated him based on his autism diagnosis. Our extended stay in Brazil had accelerated his growth in ways I couldn't have anticipated, as if the change in environment had unlocked potential previously constrained by routine and familiarity. "You're right," I agreed, though I'm less worried about his anger than about falling back into old patterns, making excuses for him, prioritizing peace over honesty. "You won't," Michael said with simple confidence. "You're different now." Different indeed. The woman who had delivered the keynote address at the International Technology Ethics Conference that morning barely resembled the timid mother who had landed in Brazil 4 months ago. My presentation on restructuring corporate governance to prioritize ethical innovation had received a standing ovation from industry leaders who had once known me only as Edward Winter's widow or Nathan Winter's mother. Our driver was waiting outside the terminal, holding a sign with Winters displayed in neat block letters. As we approached, he smiled warmly. "Mrs. Winters, Dr. Martinez asked me to give you this when you arrived." He handed me an envelope containing a brief note from Gregory. "Patricia, Nathan arrived yesterday and has been staying at the Ritz-Carlton as arranged. He's requested a private dinner with you tonight at 7 p.m. in the hotel's oceanfront restaurant. Michael is welcome to join. Or the hotel can provide an excellent private chef in your suite if he prefers a quieter evening. I've taken the liberty of upgrading your accommodations to the presidential suite to ensure maximum comfort for both of you after your long flight from Rio. Call if you need anything at all. Gregory." "Nathan wants to have dinner with us," I told Michael as we settled into the car. "How do you feel about that?" Michael considered the question with his characteristic thoroughness. "Is it a quiet restaurant? With space between tables? Knowing Nathan's preferences, it's probably very upscale and not too crowded, I replied. But you don't have to come if you'd prefer not to. I'll decide when I see it, he said pragmatically. I brought my noise-canceling headphones just in case. The drive to South Beach took us past palm-lined streets and Art Deco buildings bathed in late-afternoon sunlight. Miami's vibrant energy reminded me of Rio, though with a distinctly American polish that felt both familiar and foreign after our time abroad. The Ritz-Carlton welcomed us with elegant efficiency, the staff discreetly attentive without overwhelming Michael with excessive conversation or eye contact. Our suite overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, the same ocean we had come to love in Rio, but viewed from a different shore, a fitting metaphor for the perspective shift our journey had created. As we settled in, Michael moved methodically through the suite, examining each room with his usual attention to detail. Nice acoustics, he declared, testing the sound absorption by snapping his fingers in different locations. And good lighting, not too harsh. I smiled at his assessment. Will you be comfortable here while I meet with Nathan? The hotel can send up dinner if you prefer to stay in. He looked up from his inspection of the terrace doors. I want to try the restaurant first. I can always come back here if it's too much. His willingness to attempt an unfamiliar, potentially overwhelming environment rather than automatically choosing the safer option represented significant growth. In Rio, with the support of his therapists and the freedom to practice social navigation at his own pace, Michael had developed remarkable coping strategies for sensory challenges. At 6:45 p.m., we made our way to the oceanfront restaurant. Michael wore noise-canceling headphones around his neck, ready if needed, but his posture remained relaxed as we were escorted to a private table on the terrace. The setting sun cast golden light across the waves, the gentle ocean soundtrack providing natural white noise that actually seemed to soothe rather than aggravate his sensitivities. I spotted Nathan immediately. He stood as we approached, and I was struck by subtle but significant changes in his appearance. The impeccable designer suit remained, but his previously clean-shaven face now sported a neatly trimmed beard. More notably, the tense, controlled posture that had characterized him for years had softened somehow, his shoulders less rigid, his expression less guarded. "Mom," he said simply, stepping forward to embrace me. The gesture felt awkward but genuine, lacking the perfunctory quality his rare physical affection had carried in recent years. When he turned to Michael, I tensed instinctively, prepared to intercede if needed. But Nathan surprised me. "Hey, Michael," he said, making brief eye contact before glancing away, respecting Michael's usual discomfort with prolonged eye contact. "Is it okay if I shake your hand? Or would you prefer not to?" The consideration behind the question, acknowledging Michael's autonomy regarding physical touch, was so unlike the old Nathan that I momentarily wondered if this was truly my son. Michael extended his hand briefly. "Hello, Nathan. Your beard is new." Nathan smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "It is. My therapist suggested trying changes that separate who I'm becoming from who I was. Seems small, but it helps somehow. Visual reminders of internal changes can be effective." Michael nodded seriously. "Like how Mom stopped coloring her hair in Brazil." I touched my silver-streaked hair self-consciously. The decision to let my natural color grow out had been liberating, though I hadn't realized Michael had noticed the significance behind it. We settled at the table, an unexpectedly comfortable silence falling as we reviewed menus. The waiter appeared, and I watched with quiet amazement as Michael ordered for himself, specifying his preferences clearly and asking questions about ingredients. A level of independent interaction that would have been unthinkable before our Brazilian sojourn. After our orders were placed, Nathan took a deep breath. "I've been rehearsing what to say for weeks, but now that we're here, all my prepared speeches seem inadequate." "Maybe start with what you're feeling right now," I suggested gently. He nodded, fingers tracing the condensation on his water glass. "Shame," he said finally. "Profound shame about who I became, how I treated you both, the way I corrupted Dad's company." The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Nathan had always been defensive, quick to justify his actions or deflect responsibility. "My therapist helped me see that I've been angry my entire adult life," he continued. "Angry at Michael for needing so much of your attention. Angry at Dad for his impossible standards. Angry at you for focusing on Michael's needs while expecting me to just handle everything on my own." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. But that anger was really covering something else. Fear. Fear that I wasn't enough, that I would never measure up to Dad's expectations, that I was fundamentally unlovable except for what I could achieve. The vulnerability in his admission brought tears to my eyes, not because I agreed with his assessment, but because I recognized the kernel of truth within it. I had approached my son so differently, constantly accommodating Michael's needs while expecting Nathan to be self-sufficient, perhaps denying him the emotional support he had needed in less obvious ways. "I'm not saying this to blame you," Nathan added quickly. "My therapist has been very clear that understanding origins doesn't excuse harmful behavior. What I did, abandoning you both in Brazil, the ethical violations at the company, the way I've treated people who couldn't benefit me, those choices were mine. I'm just trying to understand why I made them so I can make different ones going forward." Michael, who had been quietly stimming with his napkin while listening, spoke unexpectedly. "Everyone needs different kinds of help. I needed help with sounds and people. Maybe you needed help with feelings." Nathan stared at his brother, genuine surprise registering on his face. "That's exactly right, Michael. I needed help with feelings, but didn't know how to ask for it." As our appetizers arrived, the conversation shifted to lighter topics: our experiences in Brazil, Michael's musical development, the technology conference where I'd spoken that morning. Nathan listened with apparent interest as Michael described the composition he was working on, asking thoughtful questions that acknowledged his brother's intelligence rather than condescending to his limitations. When the main courses arrived, Nathan returned to more difficult territory. "I want you both to know I'm not contesting any of the board's decisions. I deserve to lose my position. And Mom, your leadership has apparently inspired the entire organization. Gregory tells me employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've been since Dad was alive. I'm only interim CEO," I reminded him. "The board is finalizing their selection of Dr. Elaine Watkins next week. She's brilliant," Nathan acknowledged, "and ethical to her core. A much better fit than I ever was." He hesitated, then added, "I've been offered a position teaching business ethics at NYU, ironically enough. A former colleague who believes in second chances thinks my experience provides a unique perspective on how ethical failures evolve." "That's surprising," I admitted, "but potentially valuable. Sometimes those who have made the worst mistakes have the most to teach others about avoiding similar paths." As dessert arrived, key lime pie for Nathan and me, a carefully arranged plate of fresh tropical fruits for Michael, I found myself studying my sons with new eyes. The contrast between them remained stark. Nathan polished and strategic in his designer suit, Michael methodically separating his fruit by color before eating. Yet something had shifted in the dynamic between them, a tentative respect replacing Nathan's former impatience. "I have something to ask you both," Nathan said, setting down his fork, "and I want to be clear that there's no pressure to answer immediately or even to say yes at all." I tensed slightly, old wariness rising despite our cordial evening. "What is it?" "I'd like to visit you in Rio," he said. "Not immediately, but perhaps in a few months when I've made more progress in therapy. I want to experience the place that's brought such positive changes for both of you, and maybe," he glanced at Michael, "maybe get to know my brother in this new environment where he seems to be thriving." Michael looked up from his carefully arranged fruit. "Why?" The directness of the question might have seemed rude from anyone else, but from Michael, it was simply his way of seeking clarity. Nathan didn't seem offended. "Because I've missed a lot by viewing you through my own limitations rather than seeing your capabilities. Mom's emails about your musical compositions and your adaptation to life in Rio made me realize how little I actually know you." Michael considered this thoughtfully. "You would stay in a different apartment? Not with us?" "Absolutely," Nathan nodded. "I'd get my own place nearby. No disruption to your routine or space." Michael looked to me, silently seeking my input. "It's your decision too, Michael," I assured him. "Our home is shared space, and both of us should feel comfortable with any visitors." He turned back to Nathan. "You have to learn about personal space and not interrupt when I'm composing, and use a quiet voice in the morning." Nathan smiled, genuine warmth replacing his usual polished charm. "I can do that, Michael, I promise." "Then okay, you can visit." Michael returned to his fruit, matter settled in his straightforward way. I felt tears pricking behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from the unexpected tenderness of watching my sons negotiate a relationship as adults. each acknowledging the other's needs and boundaries. "Mom?" Nathan asked softly. "How do you feel about this?" The question itself represented growth. The old Nathan would have assumed my agreement, taking for granted that I would accommodate his preferences, as I always had. "I think a visit could be positive," I replied carefully. "With clear boundaries and expectations. We've built something special in Rio, Nathan. Something healing for both of us. I'd welcome sharing that with you, but not at the cost of the peace we've found." "I understand," he said, no defensiveness in his tone. "I know I've lost your trust, and rebuilding it will take time. I'm prepared for that journey, however long it takes." As we finished our meal and prepared to part ways, Nathan to his room, Michael and I back to our suite, my older son hesitated, then pulled a small package from his jacket pocket. "I brought something for you, Michael. A small gift if you'd like it." Michael accepted the carefully wrapped package, methodically removing the paper without tearing it. Inside was an elegant leather-bound notebook with his initials embossed in gold. "For your music compositions," Nathan explained. "I remember Dad always said great ideas should be captured in a form worthy of them." Michael ran his fingers over the smooth leather, his expression softening. "Thank you. It's beautiful." "And Mom," Nathan continued, producing a second package. "This is for you. Not to influence your decisions about anything, just a recognition." Inside was a vintage mathematics textbook, specifically the advanced calculus text I'd used during my doctoral studies at MIT. I'd mentioned once, decades ago, how I'd sold my copy to help pay for Michael's first specialized therapy sessions. "How did you find this?" I asked, tracing the familiar cover. "I've had a lot of time for reflection these past months," Nathan said. "Remembering fragments of conversations, moments when you mentioned dreams you'd set aside. It took some searching, but I found a first edition in remarkably good condition. The thoughtfulness behind the gift, not just the book itself, but the recognition of who I had been before motherhood consumed my identity, touched me deeply." As we parted in the hotel lobby, Nathan embraced me again, whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on me completely, Mom. I wouldn't have blamed you if you had." "You're my son," I replied simply. "That hasn't changed, even when everything else has." Back in our suite, Michael immediately found the perfect spot for his new notebook on the desk by the window, positioning it with precise care before preparing for bed. His nighttime routine remained reassuringly consistent, despite the emotional complexity of the evening. Later, as he slept peacefully in the adjacent room, I stood on the suite's balcony, watching moonlight dance across the Atlantic. The same ocean that lapped at the shores of our new Brazilian home stretched before me, a reminder of the connections that persisted despite distance and change. 4 months ago, abandoned in a foreign airport with my autistic son, I had made a desperate phone call that changed everything. That call had been the first step on a path I couldn't have imagined, a path leading not just to professional revolution, but to personal renaissance. My phone chimed softly with an email notification from Gregory. Dr. Elaine Watkins had formally accepted the CEO position at Winters Technology, with a specific request that I remain as board chair to help guide the company's ethical rejuvenation. The role would require only quarterly visits to Connecticut, allowing me to maintain our life in Rio while contributing meaningfully to Edward's legacy. As I composed my acceptance, another email arrived. This one from Gabriela, Michael's first music therapist in São Paulo. A renowned conductor visiting Rio had heard one of Michael's compositions during a therapy showcase and expressed interest in incorporating elements of it into an upcoming symphony. Would Michael be interested in a mentorship opportunity? I smiled, imagining Michael's reaction to this news in the morning. His world was expanding in ways neither of us could have predicted, his unique gifts finally finding the right environment to flourish. My own world had expanded similarly. The mathematics textbook Nathan had given me rested on the bedside table, a tangible reminder of the woman I had been and might become again. Perhaps, I mused, the universities in Rio might welcome a visiting mathematics lecturer, someone with a unique perspective on applied chaos theory, after witnessing its principles in action throughout her own life. 3 days later, as our plane descended toward Rio de Janeiro, the familiar landscape of our new home came into view. Sugarloaf Mountain, Christ the Redeemer, the crescent beaches embracing the Atlantic. Michael, his new composition notebook open on his lap, looked up with a contented smile. "Home," he said simply. "Yes," I agreed, the word carrying weight and meaning I couldn't have comprehended 4 months earlier. Home. Not the home defined by familiar walls and generational history, but home in a deeper sense, the place where we had both found freedom to become our truest selves. The place where an autistic son had discovered his musical voice and a long-silenced mother had reclaimed her power. As we stepped off the plane into the warm Brazilian evening, I realized that the journey that had begun with abandonment had led to the most profound homecoming of all, the return to ourselves, to possibilities long dormant, to lives fully and authentically lived. Nathan would visit in the spring, taking his first steps toward genuine connection with his brother and reconciliation with me. The company would continue under new ethical leadership, Edward's vision restored and expanded. Michael's music would find its way into the world, touching others with its unique beauty. And I, Patricia Winters, mathematician, mother, board chair, emerging composer's advocate, would continue becoming the woman I was always meant to be. One choice, one day, one brave step at a time. The call that changed everything had not been to the family attorney after all. It had been the call within myself, finally answered after decades of silence, the call to courage, to self-worth, to the remarkable life waiting beyond the boundaries of others' expectations.